Seanad Michael McDowell.
I'd like to welcome the Estonian ambassador here as well, and to acknowledge the presence as well in the chamber today of a student from the Royal and Prior School in Rathfoe, Ms. Jennifer Holly, who has come to see us and to witness our democratic institution in operation. I fully concur with what has been said in relation to Ukraine, and I want to say that as far as I'm concerned, the extent of sanctions that will have to be imposed must be massive, and they will cause hurt in the West. And we have to accept that if we really mean anything about standing in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, we have to take the economic cost if we're not going to become involved militarily, which obviously is not going to happen at all. Our democratic institutions reminds me of the following, that in 2020 in July, the Seanad bill was published in July, and then in October of that year, or November of that year, its second stage debate took place in this House. And Minister Darragh O'Brien sent his Minister of State, Malcolm Noonan, into this House to support an amendment that the bill should not be read until the 31st of December 2021. And he gave, Minister Noonan gave assurances to this House. He said that the Minister was fully committed to engaging in this process, that's Minister O'Brien, that he would engage with members, senators before Christmas. That never happened. That he would come back to the House in May 2021 with his proposals. That never happened. And before May of 2021, contacted Minister O'Brien and was assured that he was establishing a group among the government parties of members of the Oireachtas to discuss evolving proposals. That never happened. So those three commitments have been broken, and I'm putting it on the record of this House that they've been seriously broken. The second thing is that I want to put on the record of this House in the remaining half minute that I have, that when the Seanad Reform Implementation Group was established by the government, I was asked to chair it by the members of that committee against Minister Ross's wishes. It was an all-party group. We brought back our report. I submitted it to the Taoiseach. It was in accordance with the terms of reference that that government had made, and it was to implement the Manning proposals, because that was part of that government's programme. I'll finish by saying this. I went to visit the Taoiseach in early 2019, and he told me that he had no interest in implementing the Manning reports. He didn't agree with it, and he reminded me that he was an abolitionist of the Seanad. Now, I know the Leader of the House played a role in that referendum as well, and I'm not making any points in relation to that. But the people of Ireland are not content to leave this House unreformed. And the drumbeat of people saying that we should be abolished is beginning to grow again. And I just simply want to say this. I demand that the government lives up to its promises in this regard. The Green Party tried to get it into the programme for government this time around, and they were fobbed off with assurances. But I'm not going to be fobbed off with assurances, and I want to make it very, very clear that from now on, cooperation in this House and in its orderly transaction of its business is going to be seriously impeded if the government does not take reform of the method of election to this House seriously. I haven't gone away, you know. Reform hasn't gone away, you know, and it'll be daily in this House on orders of business until the government just lives up to the words and assurances that it gave the Irish people and to the members of this House, and most importantly, to the members of the implementation group who worked for 6 months on the basis that they would not be betrayed by a Taoiseach who told them that he had no interest in implementing their report. Thank you.
Senator, and As we all know, there was a referendum passed in 1979, and as to the best of my understanding is the only referendum that has been put to the people, that was passed by the people, that hasn't been implemented by successive administrations. And I want to thank everybody, and it was an all-party group that worked on that report, and they put a lot of effort into it in terms of the recommendations, the legislation that was drafted, and in our 100th year, I think that a referendum that was passed 4 decades ago should be implemented in whatever format the government see fit. But people voted in a subsequent referendum for the Seanad not as it was, but as it could be. And I want to thank Senator McDougall for his hard work in that regard. Could I also welcome Jennifer Holly and Samantha to the gallery, and hope they enjoy their visit to Seanad this morning. Could I now call on the leader of the Green Party grouping, Senator Pauline O'Reilly.
Thank you very much. And as one of the 2 parties who were against abolition of the Seanad, I would like to say that I'm more than happy for you to bring up the issue of Seanad reform every day, Senator McDougall, and I'd certainly support you on that, and we'll do all that we can to get that Seanad reform happening. I would like to welcome the Estonian ambassador as well to the chamber today, and I know that this should be a day of celebration for the people of Estonia, and is indeed, but also I'm very conscious that the entire region now is living in fear, and we already have seen Lithuania, for instance, looking for to call a state of emergency within their own country. So what's happening in Ukraine is having a knock-on impact across the entire region, and I think of all of those who are living in this country, citizens and non-citizens who have connections with the area and with the region, who are very fearful. And I'm sure we've all seen the queues of people trying to get out of Ukraine at the moment, and my heart really does go out to those people. I'd like to agree with all of the previous speakers that we have to have the very strongest sanctions possible, and that is going to be difficult. I would agree with that, but we've known that this is coming for some time, and despite what Mr. Putin has said, we all knew that it was lies, that there was nothing happening, and that there was nothing going to happen over the subsequent days, and we've seen that today, and it has been lie after lie, so we shouldn't expect any different. And I do believe that there has been a delay in action by the EU, by the US, and by the UK in relation to this, and it's no longer acceptable, and we have to see what we can do here. I believe that certainly the Russian ambassador in this country has a lot to answer for, and that's our closest link here, and we need to be examining whether the ambassador continues to be welcome in this country. That's my own view on it. We have the ambassador of Estonia here today, who is very welcome, and all of those links with diplomacy, they must mean something. There's no point in having people in our country unless that actually stands for something. And diplomacy has broken down, as Senator Kine has said. Or was there even any efforts by Russia? I don't believe that there was. So, look, that's the end of my time, and I had hoped to speak about a number of other things, but I think that this is the most important issue today facing us, and that's what order of business is about. Thank you very much, Leader.
Gormaigad a Caherlí agus Ceanara bhhailm ar dúspara go gainan chin fion gréabhachtaí na Rúise agus iad ag sarú teoran na Ukraine. Leader, I want to begin by expressing Sinn Féin's own condemnation for the actions of Russia in violating the national, the territorial integrity of the Ukraine, and I know we'll all stand united in this House, and that's very important in condemning the latest invasion that we have seen over the last 24 hours. And indeed call for all of the necessary diplomatic and political response that this state can bring to bear. As other colleagues have said, we have seen already the real humanitarian impact that will play out before our eyes unless there is a step back from these actions. And as I encouraged last week, Leader, I think it would be useful for the House to hear an update from the Minister for Foreign Affairs or whoever the government deems appropriate in how this state will utilise its role on the UN Security Council to coordinate humanitarian responses, to ensure that there is support for those who will be fleeing and seeking refuge, and indeed that the necessary aid and support is delivered to people who will no doubt be suffering as a result of these actions. So that has to be, I think, first and foremost in our minds, and we need to lean in to that international role. We need to lean into our own experience of peace building and conflict resolution. And of course, as other colleagues have said, such breaches of international laws need to be met with sanction. And I just want to reference maybe steps that we could take, because obviously this state has its own responsibilities in that regard, and Russia and Vladimir Putin's inner circle possess large amounts of offshore wealth, Leader. The IFSC is a major source of finance to the Russian economy, with €118 billion funnelled from the IFSC to Russia between 2005 and 2017, second only to Luxembourg. Often this has been through Section 110s, an issue which my colleague, Deputy Mairead Farrell, has raised in the other House a number of times. So, for example, VEB, a Russian state investment company whose supervisory board has been controlled by members of Vladimir Putin's government, raised $9.3 billion between 2010 and 2013 through a Section 110 vehicle. So we need to hear, will the government end the use of Section 110 companies, many of which have charitable status, used to funnel funds that could be connected to the Russian state apparatus and to Vladimir Putin's inner circle? So I would welcome the opportunity to have those statements, Leader, and again just in joining colleagues in sending our solidarity and support to the Ukrainian people at this time.
The Leader of the Labour grouping, Senator Rebecca Moynihan.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. And like my other colleagues, I am quite frankly stunned by the actions of a brutal dictator and imperialist, Vladimir Putin, in Ukraine today. And this very much fits in with their aggressive foreign policy that they've adopted over the last number of years. For example, supporting the brutal dictator Assad in Syria. And while I hear an awful lot of people talking about war on our doorstep since World War II, I think it's also important to remember Russia's role in the Balkans. And it is not 30 years since we had a brutal civil war in the Balkans that is on the look of breaking out again. Russia's role in not recognising Kosovo, for example, for a very long time, and supporting Syria. And this is part of an aggressive foreign policy that they have adopted on their eastern flank. In 2005, it's alleged that Russia poisoned the Ukrainian opposition leader, Viktor Yushchenko, which led to the October Revolution. And we also saw breakouts in 2014. This hasn't happened out of nowhere. This has been a very aggressive strategy pursued by Russia, particularly since Vladimir Putin took over, and has worsened. I never thought I would see the day where you would see boots on the ground going in from Russia to a neighbour in Ukraine. I had always thought that they were going to do their playbook of cyber attacks and financial things and funding opposition and using their Cold War tactics, but it is a dark day for Europe, and I do urge the Irish government to take a harsh response in terms of sanctions. I think it's really important what Taoiseach Micheál Martin said today. What gives one man the ability to decide that other young men, 18, 19, 20, are going to have their lives taken from them? And that's a failure of international diplomacy, but that's also obviously been a long-planned attack today from Vladimir Putin, where we have all been played in terms of it. Leader, I also want to raise another issue which is causing disquiet amongst many people, which is the changes in the tenant purchase scheme, which was lowering the eligibility threshold to allow old age pensioners being taken in. But the timelines for people having lived there, both individuals and people in couples, has been extended from 1 year to 10 years. There's an awful lot of people who were applying for the tenant purchase scheme, pulling together their P60s, who have suddenly been told that they are now not eligible. The SI was only signed off at the end of January, so I would ask, and I'll finish up here, that the Minister reconsider this for people who are in the process of the tenant purchase scheme, that they're still able to apply and people aren't cut off suddenly the way that they have been.
Anish, Seanad, Eugene Murphy.
Agus Cairc, and like many other members today, I want to express my horror and, I suppose, upset at what has happened overnight. Certainly getting up early this morning to come back from Roscommon and switching on the news after 5 a.m, even though, I suppose, listening over the past few days, it was inevitable that it was going to happen, but I still have this inner belief that Putin wouldn't push this way. And the sad thing today is to hear about people being killed, people being injured, innocent people. And where I'm really shocked is the arrogance of the attack. I mean, I think maybe most of us accepted that there might be some incursions into this alleged independent area, which Russia call it. But now we see that they seem to be targeting far greater areas. And I was one of the foolish people for many years that said, well, maybe Putin is different. We have a different Russia. But he's not. And I think we're now dangerous. We're dealing with a really dangerous individual. And I have to say, some Russians that I know in this country, and I've been in contact with recent days, do not approve of this. I think we should remember that they're quite successful young people. They're in business. They don't want this war. So maybe, just maybe, if he continues this aggressive action, and sadly there's a loss of death for Russians as well as Ukrainians, he may fall on his own sword. And hopefully he will. Because I think in a democratic world, we cannot stand for this type of aggression from anybody. It is simply outrageous. So, as the Taoiseach said last night, and many others said, you know, we've just come out of 2.5, 3 years of COVID. Hopefully we're out of it, not fully, but we're now into a world crisis. And there is, as Senator McDowell said, going to be pain. It's going to be pain for this nation. And I think, Leader, what we have to look out for now is the vulnerable people who will be hit again by this because of sanctions or whatever. We have to do our best as politicians to look after those people. Thank you very much.
Anish, Seanad, Maria Byrne.
Thanks very much, Leader, I rise today for two things, really. First of all, I suppose, in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, as everybody else has spoken about, you know, and the fact that the war has started overnight, certainly, and, you know, just to think of the people and what they're going through at the moment. In terms of the Taoiseach, they announced this week the terms of reference for the Shannon Estuary Economic Group, and this will be a group, they're looking for expressions of interest, and it's looking at Limerick, Clare and North Tipperary, and I suppose what can be carried out on the estuary in terms of our docklands, the ports. I know in Limerick City we have the second, or in Limerick we have the second port, or second largest port, but also in terms of depth. So there's huge potential there in terms of job creation and industry location right along the Shannon Estuary. So they're to report in terms of their we'll say their findings by October, and I think this is a positive announcement for Limerick and for the Midwest region as well. So I want to welcome that. And the second thing is that I'm alarmed at the amount of burglaries, and especially burglaries on farms. And I know that Sergeant Leach from the Crime Prevention Unit in Limerick certainly has been warning farmers in terms of securing their farms, maybe looking at CCTV cameras in terms of maybe buildings that are not covered from or are not seen from their house, and also about securing their properties in terms of proper fencing or gates or that, because there has been a huge escalation in terms of robberies on farms, and this is something farmers are going through a lot at the moment, and there's a lot going on, and it's very sad to find that burglaries have escalated in terms of farmers. Thank you.
Seanad, Victor Boyhan.
Thank you, Cahir. Look, I suppose we're all talking about Ukraine, and rightly so. This morning I woke up at about 3:10, which is unusual for me. I'm not going morning, noon and night. But this morning, for some reason, I woke up at 3:20. And I came down and I had toast and tea, because I thought then I'd go back up and go to bed and quickly and be back in here. But anyway, I turned on BBC. And I suppose the first thing I saw was Geraldine Nason-Byrne, a wonderful, wonderful Irish public servant, and of course is our permanent representative of the United Nations, at the United Nations, live at the table of the United Nations meeting. So here we are bringing this live into our homes, this unfolding catastrophe, this you know, really interesting thing. I thought, one, I was very proud of Geraldine Nason-Byrne, I know her well, but also the fact that we in Ireland can be very proud of her representation sitting at the UN. But at the same time, of course, we had Tony Connolly from RTE coming live, telling us, his quotes were, "We are in a fog of war. We are in a fog." What better way to describe it? And the uncertainty. And then just before I slipped up to go up to bed, I changed channel to see Orla Gearan. Orla Gearan, another great journalist from Ireland, again on the war front, togged out with her arm, her protective clothing, and also on the front line. So today I think it's important that we remember the journalists that are on the front line, the journalists that are bringing back the story and hopefully helping to tell the truth of this terrible travesty that's happening on part of mainland Europe. So I just want to say that I think that's really important. Our thoughts and our words and our prayers have to be with the Ukraine people. And also I want to be conscious of the OSCE PA, of which I was a former member, and I know there are members in these houses that are members of the OSCE, and the important work that they do. And again, that thing of shine a light on a dark place and shine a light of hope for others. But these are sad days, but they're important days as members of Europe. And I also want to remember, as I said earlier, the journalists, particularly Orla Gearan, particularly Tony Connolly, and particularly Geraldine Nason-Byrne, who are there on the line and in some way are the eyes and ears for we and us people in Ireland, but also for the world.
Or Aaron McGreehan.
And first I want to welcome our Estonian ambassador, but she's left the room. But I want to stand here today and say we're all standing with Ukraine. And you wake up this morning and it was really a dark shadow over us all this morning. And when you think about, when you listen to the Ukrainian ambassador on Morning Ireland this morning, and tears and her voice shaking, because this is our family. And we must, you know, we're all standing here really strong for Ukraine today, but we must remember how we got to here. And you know, history will only reflect on how we got to this point. And have we sleepwalked into this situation just to be a little bit richer here in the West? You know, we have trade deals going with questionable countries. And are we doing the right thing just to be a little bit richer? We need to reevaluate what we're doing, working with countries who have human rights, huge human rights questions over them. And now we have a situation where Russia are invading an independent sovereign state and causing loss of life. And we have to listen and think about the ripple effect of that, not only on Ukrainians, not only on Eastern Europe. When you think about the legacy that's going to put on and little children and families, and the displacement of families and displacement of normal rites of passage that they're all possibly could miss out on now. And I think it's as a mother standing here, and I just to transfer myself to as a mother in Ukraine now, and it must be a desperate sick feeling to be and to know and hear the bombs going off. So I just stand here and think of our friends in Ukraine, think of all the families in Ukraine and all the Ukrainian family across the world. So thank you.
Seanad or Micheál Carrigy.
Just like my colleagues, I'd like to echo the comments in relation to Ukraine, to support our Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, who's acting on behalf of everyone here in Ireland. And I think something we should consider, I think it was said by Senator O'Reilly, and I know our young Fine Gael branch passed a motion with regard to diplomatic relationships, between the two countries. I think they've stepped across the line, and I think it's something that we should consider with regard to the Ambassador for Russia here in Ireland. I'd also like to raise the issue with regard to ophthalmologist service in my own home county in Longford, and the fact that we haven't had one since July 2021. The position wasn't filled, and we haven't actually had someone in place since that. Parents were never informed. The previous time this happened a number of years ago, the files are transferred to Athlone, and then people were called called in. That hasn't happened this time. So I'd ask maybe if you could write to the Minister for Health and get a date of when that service will be returned to the county, and let the parents know. And just in relation to last Tuesday, Minister Helen McEntee was down in Longford. We had a number of visits. We visited Longford Women's Link, the domestic violence group. They're doing tremendous work. But we also met Corran and Og, the Youth Council, who were discussing the Community Safety Partnership, of which Longford is one of the 3 trial areas. And a very, very interesting discussion on the issues they felt on the ground and actual proposals that they put forward for changes to be made. And one of the proposals that came from a number of the groups was actually lids for glasses in nightclubs or pubs. And I know this has been brought up before, but we provide them in every shop and coffee dock and that for cups of coffee. We provide beer mats, etc. Could we not provide lids with alcohol, which is to be purchased in a pub or a nightclub, for the youngsters to feel unsafe with regard to some drugs, etc., that are being put into drinks and being spiked? I think it's a simple thing if it was there in every public house, as I say, a nightclub, and available for people to use. Thank you.
Much Cahirlock, and like yourself, I met the Estonian ambassador just before she was leaving, and I was in Estonia once trying to head the European presidency a couple of years ago, and what struck me there was their fear of the regime next door and how vulnerable they felt. And it was a kind of a permanent cloud that at any time something could happen to them. And it wasn't something that I'd ever really considered before, but I certainly came home from Estonia going, they're living in kind of constant fear that something may happen. And I think a lot of the former Soviet states, in Georgia and others, Ukraine, have a similar kind of foreboding that something at any point in time might happen. But I never thought, and funny enough, I woke up at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know why I did either. And I just looked at my phone, and all of a sudden on Twitter, all this stuff happening, and people in hotel rooms in Ukraine, the breakfast is being served. Now the breakfast is being cancelled. We're all being moved into air raid shelters or bomb shelters or whatever. And I don't think many of us really know an awful lot about Ukraine historically. It's a country that's bigger than France in terms of its geographic size. It's 44 million people. It's very rich in many natural resources, and maybe that's another part of why Russia wants to do what they want to do. But we must, and Ireland has more involvement than we think. Like the single biggest operator of flights in and out of Ukraine last week, and almost every week, is Ryanair. Ryanair operate loads of flights in and out from all over Europe, in and out of Ukraine. Much more than their own national airline does, because it's far bigger. And I know Ireland, I think, has quite a significant aviation leasing industry with the Russian airlines, and I think maybe that should be looked at in terms of sanctions, because we're not going to be militarily involved with dealing with Russia, but we have to exercise any and every power we have. We have a position on the UN Security Council at the moment that we wouldn't normally have, or we don't have very often at least. And I do think everything that has to be done, and whatever about expelling an ambassador and bringing another one in, and if that needs to be done, that needs to be done. We definitely need to bring them in and talk to the ambassador. And only a week ago in prime time, he said they'd no interest in going into Ukraine, and now they're bombing civil apartment blocks. And finally, just say, Cahirlock, sorry to delay, there are a group of Ukrainian nationals at the gate, and I'm going to go out to them and express my solidarity with them. I'm sure lots of other senators, now that they know they're there, may want to do so I'm going to go out, leader, so I will look at the response you give to all of us later. But I do want to express my solidarity with the people of Ukraine, as I'm sure we all do. And I just ask, not the Russian people, because the Russian people I'm sure are very honourable in many ways, but the Russian authorities, you know, it isn't too late to pull back. It isn't too late to slow down. They may not think that way, but I think we should all be saying, you know, let's just pause, pull back. This is not okay. Nobody wins in a war, ever. And just to thank you, Ciarán, thank you, and thank you, leader.
Seanad or Garrett Heron.
Thanks very much, Ciarán, and can I follow on from the comments by everyone today in terms of the shocking news that's happening in Ukraine, and just to give my solidarity to the people of Ukraine and what they're going through. It's been a difficult number of weeks, but you know, today is different than the last number of weeks, because it's actually happening, and the lives of people have been drastically changed in the last 24 hours, and to recognise that. Ciarán, the N24 is something I've brought up, leader, numerous times in the Seanad, and because it was taken off the TII strategy to build a new road between Waterford and Limerick, and it's a section from Cahir to Waterford that has been taken off the list. It's 1.5 million to keep it going. It's an important strategic piece of infrastructure for the region of the South East, connecting two major cities. It's a very dangerous road. It was agreed on the National Development Plan that this was going to continue. It's only 3 months since the National Development Plan when Eamon Ryan himself decided that it wasn't going to continue any further. We have 40 councillors. Most of the road goes through Tipperary. We have 40 councillors in Tipperary who are all in support of the N24 road upgrade. All Oireachtas members are in favour of the N24 upgrade. All officials in Tipperary County Council are in favour of the N24 upgrade. It is virtually impossible to get full agreement between public representatives on anything, and we have full agreement on this. We have a Dublin minister who himself has decided that this isn't good for the area. I'm calling on him, and the reason I'm calling on him to make a decision quickly on this is because the company who are involved in delivering this project are finishing if the funding doesn't continue anymore. They're finishing at the end of this month. So there's about 10 days left for the minister to reverse his decision. He needs to reverse his decision. This was committed to in a national development plan last October. You can't just change your mind overnight, tell no one about it, and we just find out in an email a week before Christmas. That's not the way government performs, and that's not the way the Green Party should be treating us in government, in my view. This is a really significant investment in the area, and it needs to be reversed. It needs to be reversed before the end of this month. Thanks very much.
John McGann.
Thank you. And yeah, look, like other colleagues, it's you know, Ukraine is a country that wanted to make closer ties to the European Union. It wanted to join the European Union, wanted to join NATO. And an attack on Ukraine, as initiated by Russia, is an attack on anyone who's a believer in democracy around the world. You know, and that's what's at stake here. It's democracy and the way of life that we all believe in and support is what's at stake here. Leader, and something else, I'm not asking for debate, I'm not calling for anything, I just want to make reference to a committee that I attended with Senator Carrigy yesterday, which was, I attended the Oireachtas Media Committee yesterday to see the testimony of Francis Hall, the Facebook whistleblower, and Senator Byrne was there too. And the point that I just want to really mention about Francis is, if you imagine it, last May, nobody knew who she was. No one in this world knew who she was. She saw practices that were going on within Facebook, which she was which she knew was deeply, deeply wrong, how their algorithms work and everything else. And she decided, at immense personal sacrifice, to lift the lid on that and to let the world know about the shady practices that Facebook engage in when it comes to their algorithms. And now she is known right across the world. She is speaking to parliamentarians right across the world to try and best inform us about the dangers that are posed by this company. And I just would like to, commend what I said yesterday to her, which is her moral fortitude, to have the ability to be able to do that by yourself, and by yourself, one sole individual, to take on one of the largest companies in the world virtually by yourself and to lift the lid on it. I think that's something that is so commendable and that we can all be so proud of. And I'd just like to put it on the record of this House that I think Frances Hall has done a tremendous service, not just to Ireland, but right across the world, in allowing us to know exactly what big tech companies are up to and about how we can best tackle it to protect citizens.
Carmela Mahagan, Anish, Seanad or Emer Curry.
Morning, Cathaoirleach and Leader. Yes, we've all woken up to not shocking news given the direction of travel over the last few weeks, but certainly sinister from the Ukraine. And I agree that we must be doing everything in our diplomatic, humanitarian, political power to support the people of the Ukraine. Today, the draft development plan for Fingal 2023 to 2029 has